joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. He's a friend of the show now. He's definitely a friend of the show now.
We've come so long. We've come so far.
Yeah, I remember a time when I was more of a topic that wasn't all that friendly. But
Holden Thorp is the former chancellor of North Carolina. He is now the editor-in-chief of the Science magazine. It's like more than just one magazine, though, right? You have like a whole family of magazines.
Just 6, which is small compared to a lot of our competitors. But the flagship Science is the one that some people would know. Although a lot of people think I'm the editor of Scientific American, which I'm not.
Not the same thing. Not the same.
You got to be careful these days. But
So you were chancellor at North Carolina during an interesting time, and we wanted to pick your brain about that time because it's kind of like Battlestar Galactica, right? Everything has happened before, it's going to happen again. And Florida State was not happy back around 2010, 2011, 2012. Maryland is getting ready to leave, and there's this other grant of rights that you have to sign, and it's to secure the future of it. But if I remember reporting from back in the day, Florida State wasn't happy, and they had to be wooed by John Swofford, the former commissioner of North Carolina. And as a president, you're having these conversations. As a chancellor, you're having these conversations. So what was that time like? What was Florida State upset about? And why did they ultimately sign that grant of rights in the first place if they weren't happy?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a huge irony to all of this because I was the chair of the Council of Presidents when all of this went down. And, you know, as the last guy picked in kickball my whole life, it was a pretty wild place for me to be, but it ended up having a big impact on where we are now. So obviously, so when Maryland left and we did the Notre Dame deal, I was the chair then. And then also when we added Louisville and when we did the grant of rights deal. So it was a lot. It was a lot for this guy whose connection with sports ended when I stopped being the defensive tackle on the Honeycutt Giants in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So when we were trying to do the grant of rights deal, obviously Maryland had left. If we hadn't gotten the grant of rights deal done, I think the ACC would have been in very grave danger because everybody else had a grant of rights and that we were competing with, and we still had this exit fee, which we ended up arguing with Maryland about. We came to, I mean, that was after I left, but they seemed to have come to an agreement that everybody went along with. But the exit fee, you know, and you can see why now. The exit fee is not a good system because a new conference that wants you can just figure out a way to pay that. So we really needed everybody to sign over their broadcast rights. And most of us wanted to do it. There were a couple of schools that were a little iffier. And actually, we scheduled one call. Here's a little bit of drama for you. We scheduled one call that we thought we had it. And it turns out there were 2 holdouts. And of course,
statute of limitations. You could tell us
who were the
it's UVA and Florida State.
Okay.
Virginia.
That was all about the conflict between Terry Sullivan and her board. That really didn't have anything to do with sports.
Okay.
So politics. That was politics.
Yeah, that was politics.
All right.
So I told Swofford we really shouldn't have a call because if we have a call and 2 people vote against it, guys like you are going to figure that out, and it could have blown up the whole thing. Because every time we had a call, as soon as we hung up,
so you saw it.
We saw it on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not sure I ever told you this, guys, this, but when I did the deal with Bubba Cunningham, we shook hands on the deal. I put him in the car. We were at the residence. I went back to my computer. I opened Twitter, and it said Bubba Cunningham to be the new athletic director at North Carolina. So anyway, it was like 30 seconds or something.
Okay.
So I didn't want to have a call where it wasn't unanimous. So we canceled the call, and I told Swofford, you need to get on a plane to Tallahassee and Charlottesville, which he did. The UVA thing was straightforward. The board just felt like they weren't being consulted enough, and so he went and romanced the board, and that was all that was needed there. the Florida State one, you know, I think Eric Barron was the president then. He wanted to do the deal, but his board was in a similar place to where Rick McCullough's board is now. But, you know, they didn't really have that many other good options at the time. And I think this is probably still true. Florida didn't want Florida State in the SEC.
Say it louder and clearer so that everyone
yes.
kind of understands what Florida State's options are. Take all of the ESPN portion of this out of the equation, like Florida, Alabama, Georgia. What incentive would they have to help Florida State? They don't.
Zero. Yeah.
What do you need? The Tallahassee market? Like,
right.
Yeah, you don't
get out of here.
I mean, people
the good thing. Yeah, the good thing for me then was that Bernie Matchin was the president of Florida, and he had been at UNC before. And when you become a new president, the AAU assigns you a mentor, and Bernie was assigned to be my mentor. So I've always been in close touch with him.
Wait, the AAU is real? It's not just an excuse the Big Ten uses to keep schools out?
Yeah, the AAU is real. It has nothing to do with sports, but it is a real thing. Yeah, and Florida and North Carolina both happen to be in it.
Right.
So I was certain that Florida didn't want Florida State in the SEC. That left really only the Big 12 as a place for them to go. And at the time, I mean, this is all very ironic now, but at the time, the Big 12 was seen as the weakest of the Power Five. Now they're number 3, I would say, quite solidly.
That's a magic trick, isn't it?
It is amazing. Yeah.
They lost Texas and Oklahoma.
Remember when Dan Beebe was the commissioner and everybody was down on him? And yeah, it's amazing how things have changed.
Although there's nitpicking as to where that ranking is. Essentially, the Big 12 and the ACC are on comparable levels, and depending on who you ask in the industry, the ACC, especially when the Raycom deal comes off the books, the ACC will be back in that 3rd spot. But they both share a similar problem.
They're both really far away from the 2nd spot.
But the one advantage, and I guess this is where we get into like-mindedness amongst presidents. You know, the one advantage that the Big 12 has now is that the schools that they're made up of have more in common than ACC schools have in common right now. And the same issues that presented themselves back in 2012, 2013, before you stepped away from North Carolina, are back at it again because the same players are upset. Florida State still wants more money.
Yeah. So how'd you get them in 12 to agree?
How'd you get them to agree?
Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't there. Swafford went down there and did his Ninja Swaff routine. And convinced them. Probably he told them, you know, what he was planning to do with the contract and all of that. And shortly thereafter, they were ready, and so we had another call where everybody got on and voted for the deal and we all signed those contracts that you somehow obtained the copy that I signed.
Yeah, you were the weak link.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you got that, but that's okay. It's probably better for everybody that it's out there.
But we don't have the other one.
See the updated one.
Yeah, the updated one.
Sure.
We have.
Oh yeah, no, I don't know. I was gone when the updated one was done, and the term on that was very shrewdly negotiated, I have to say. I can't take credit for that. I think the first one we did was just for a few years, but this later one is long term. So I think Florida State, you know, listen, Rick McCullough and I have known each other a long time. I spoke at his installation. He's a chemist also. I think he's in a tough spot with his board, who thinks that that Florida State should have some magic spell to do more. The truth is, it's been a long time since they won that championship. Was it been 10 years almost?
We're getting there, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, they haven't really put a lot on the board to make another conference do a whole lot to get them. So, you know, I don't know what they're going to do. It sounds like they're going to try to raise money to buy out of the grant of rights deal.
Because private equity money always works out.
Right. And I don't, you know, there has to be a number, I'm sure, at which they could get out. But the ACC is, unless there's something about the contract that I don't know about, not obligated to take that. I mean, they've signed away their their rights until that contract expires. And
right.
they could pay. I mean, they're going to, yes, try to pay their way out of it, but then where are they going to go? They're not, the Big Ten's not going to take them. The SEC won't take them unless, you know, as long as Florida is there.
Mm-hmm.
So they could go to the Big 12 if it's that much better than the ACC, but
it's
you know,
not.
like you said, it's debatable.
Yeah.
Which one of those is better. So
I hesitate to give away free advice to Florida State, but since we're talking to you,
yeah, sure.
They could pull a Butch Davis and get money from the Big Ten. The Big Ten would have to be, so they'd have to become an AAU member. They'd have to go to the Big Ten because in theory, the Big Ten would like to get into the state of Florida, in theory. Then they'd have to get the Big Ten in lieu of broadcast rights, right? They could be a special assistant to Greg Schiano. You're not coaching.
Why do you got to do this to Holden like
You're
that?
not coaching. Why you never get back up? Wait, these aren't our media rights. This is a gift. This is an endowment AAU gift from the Big Ten to Florida State, right?
I'm not sure I see the connection, but okay.
No, your guy you had to pay.
No, I know that. Yes.
He was an executive assistant.
Right.
He wasn't, I'm not coaching. I'm an executive assistant to the principal, to the vice regional principal. So
something tells me that's not going to work, but
no, that's not
you
going to
never
work.
know.
And also,
You never know.
Hey, private equity money, you know, the way private equity works, they could throw a bunch of money at them and then tell Mike Norvell, you're no longer the coach. We got this AI chat bot that's going to do the plays because it's taking all your information, because that's what private equity is about.
So at what point, Holden Thorp, you're like a certified scientific genius, right? Like,
I'm a guy who helps certified scientific
legitimately in your youth coming up, you know, you're like a prodigy, if you will. Let's go prodigy instead of genius.
Mm-hmm.
You're into science, obviously.
Yes.
You become, you know, you have a leadership position academically at the school, at UNC. Then you become the chancellor. You know, this is a school you love. This is a school you've loved your whole life. At what point did you realize you were wholly unprepared for the athletic portion of this? Because I don't think people realize you're the one who makes the sausage at that level. The president chancellor level is where the decisions are made. It's not by the head coach. It's not Roy Williams. It's not Nick Saban. It's not the athletic director. It's the presidents and chancellors.
Yeah, well, I think there are two different tracks. I mean, as far as this unlikely event by which I became the chair of the ACC during its most pivotal time, you know, I think we did about as well as we could on that. As you guys have pointed out, maybe some of the additions earlier weren't necessarily the best ones for football revenue anyway. But, you know, from Maryland leaving to getting the grant of rights done, I mean, I think those were solid decisions, and Swafford and I.
Louisville was your call?
Yes.
On your watch.
Yeah. Yeah. So we added Louisville because that's who Florida State and Clemson wanted.
Okay.
Some of the nerdier schools wanted a different school that you can probably guess. And so if you go in the
we're processing. But anyway.
Yeah.
What tiny academic school was out there?
Villanova? Like, what are we doing here?
No, it was UConn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was all over the media then, you guys. Don't you
That's
remember?
right. UConn, but
the way Louisville or UConn.
But the way I remember it in the sports talk radio days is that UConn wanted to be in the ACC to the point where I think them and Cincinnati were like openly wooing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You know, like gift baskets were sent, and everybody kind of laughed off UConn because of football. If you're going to make these moves, it's for football. And Louisville at that time had one of the largest athletic budgets. Not just in the ACC, but in the country, and they still do. So Louisville always made a heck of a lot of sense. They just had to get past the academic portion, and they sold it on, hey, we're ramping up. We're about to be at this level, X, Y, Z. So I'm glad you brought us to where I wanted to go and how presidents interact. You talked about how you have a mentorship. Presidents talk. It's a small group of people that end up doing this job. I mean, heck, there's connections with, you know, Carol Folt at North Carolina, and then she goes to Southern Cal, and now these things all kind of play out. So when the presidents start talking, that leads us to where we are right now, where there's reports of a conversation where Cal and Stanford, these remaining the Pac-4, you know, like, hey, let's talk about bringing them on. And Joe and I are sitting going, Why would you do that? It makes no sense whatsoever. Cross-country travel, they're not exactly known as huge football television teams, right? But you just kind of hit on it. Presidents want to be with like-minded schools, and Stanford and Cal would fit in with what some presidents would want, but we're not talking football. There'd be other factors that would excite them about a Stanford Cal, and I guess that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. So just to finish off the Louisville thing, there was support for UConn, but we worked the phones and got the Louisville deal done.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember the first night Louisville played Miami or something like that. I texted Swafford and I said we did it, and I was in St. Louis by then, but it was awesome. And I did okay at that part. It was really just logic. The part that I wasn't prepared for was just understanding the relative priorities of all of this compared to what I thought I was hired to do. And it turns out, the trustees who hired me thought this will be so cool to get this nerdy guy to come try to make us into MIT, which I thought was the most important thing. But then I found out it wasn't. Yeah. Then I went to some jobs where I was much better suited to be. But anyway, so on Cal and Stanford, I mean, look, if you throw geography out the window, which obviously we've done.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Oceans are connected.
Right. So, geography is so 2012. So if it's gone and you say, okay, who makes sense in the ACC? Well, there's no question that Cal and Stanford are two of the 4 or 5 best research universities in America. So anybody would want to be a president in a club with those 2 schools. So I see the appeal of that. They have the non-revenue program at Stanford is the greatest in the world. If you put it with the non-revenue programs at North Carolina and Notre Dame, you have, complete domination. Nobody cares about that, and it doesn't make any money. It's called non-revenue for a reason. Right. But it would be pretty awesome for guys like me who love to watch that stuff. As far as whether it's going to help football revenue, obviously it's not. Why is ESPN going to care about paying for a Cal North Carolina football game when they have Bama Georgia to sell? But I wouldn't be surprised if that deal went through. I could see how the presidents would agree that that's a good thing.
But I feel like at least based on my conversations I've had with people in the last 36 hours, there's more presidents like you back in 2012, 13 or whatever it was, arguing against UConn, and that logic has to take over, and logically adding Stanford and Cal doesn't really do anything. And look, I'm of the opinion right now, Holden, that you don't want to do anything that would embolden Florida State to try to pick a fight in court over the grant of rights. The argument being, yes, when you sign a new grant of rights, they're basically rolled into membership. You can't reopen the grant of rights. But I could see Florida State, and as agitating as they've been, agent of chaos as they've been, saying, well, you've just decreased our value by adding these 2 schools that don't do anything for us. To your point, we'd rather show Georgia, Alabama, or a 9th conference game in the SEC, and Florida State would try to argue their way out of it. I just feel like we're now into that political realm more so than the logic realm, and you've seen this play out firsthand in the room where it happened.
Yeah, and listen, there are people that I know and care about and trust doing this. I mean, Kevin, Randy, Susan, these are, and even Rick. I mean, I realize he's kind of a renegade right now, but he's a sharp guy. So I feel very comfortable that they're the ones that are working all this out. And yeah, the sports decision would be not to add Cal and Stanford. There's no question about that. but it would be, I could see some of the schools wanting to do that. We'll see.
What do you think would be a better model for college sports if you could start this thing all over again?
You mean as far as the conferences are concerned, or the whole thing?
No, the whole thing. Like I'm sitting here saying to you, you're a prodigy in science. And no disrespect, man, but why in the world are you the one making decisions about it?
Yeah, I tried to make that point.
Good ones, and you illustrated what I have been talking about, that relationships are how these decisions get made. Okay, John Swofford, Jim Delaney, that helps Carolina. That's always helped Carolina. When you have two powerful people like that, that helps. And I think they were both really good leaders, and I think they tried to do what was best for collegiate sports. But I'm looking at it now, and I'm looking at what Brad Kavanaugh wrote, and I'm going, your whole model is FUBAR. Total FUBAR. Okay? So the only way to fix it is to blow it up and start it over. And I just don't see any voices right now in college sports going, you know what would be other than Rick Pitino.
Yeah.
You know what would be a really good idea? Let's break football off, because quite frankly, travel for football is different than travel for volleyball and some of these other sports.
It's once a week. It's all that stuff.
Could easily play a regional schedule. But I just don't see anyone, including the Big Ten, who's responsible for this mostly, going, hey, let's come up with a better idea for how to make this happen, make this work. And it's not Joe Giglio saying it. It's not Rick Pitino saying it. It's the Supreme Court Justice saying it. And that's the part where it frustrates me. And I wish even though I just impugned your character, I do wish there was someone as smart as you in that room, at least bringing up these points and saying, now, wait a second, what are we doing? How do we make this better? How do we make this right?
Yeah, so I agree that football has gotten into its own category. I mean, basketball doesn't generate as much revenue at most schools. And, most of the money is in the tournament. I haven't looked lately at the ratings for a regular season college basketball games.
It depends on the matchup. Shocker, Duke Carolina still does well in the ratings.
But not as well as the Pinstripe Bowl.
That's true.
Between Indiana and Wake Forest.
Yeah, right. It's college bowl games in the middle of December against two, 6-6 teams or whatever. Still
even Kentucky, Louisville. Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. So obviously you have a whole different situation with football. And I think one of the things that caught people by surprise was that the gap has been widening during the time that all of this has been going on. So there was a time when, even like when I first started and Dickie was taking me through, a lot of the way it all worked, where the differential between basketball and football was not nearly as great as it is now,
right. Especially at Carolina.
Yeah. So that is another element to this that people probably haven't adapted to as quickly as they should. Although Jim Delaney obviously had it completely figured out, as he did with many other things.
Carolina's running things. We'll close on this, and Holden Thorp joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. We appreciate your time.
See, I'm just a stupid state grad. What do I know?
So
you got a wonderful school over there and a great chancellor.
Northwestern.
Yeah.
They released a statement when more pending lawsuits popped up, that they had to do some sort of I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the statement in front of me, but essentially it was, we have to take a look at our relationship as an academic institution and what sports does to those types of things. If you really wanted to read into it, you could see a situation where the Northwestern president was saying, is sports really worth it, all things considered, when it leads to things like this and it affects our reputation? And this is kind of like a two-pronged question. You've dealt with that push and pull of being successful and corners cut or a culture taking over that supersedes what your school mission is, and it all kind of playing out publicly with various investigations, everything else. So I'm curious what you're seeing at Northwestern and whether or not presidents going forward we'll finally get around to asking the big question: is it worth it for us to pursue football this way?
Right. So there's two things I think that are of interest. One is when you commission the report, you can be certain that when the report comes, nobody's going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So remember Governor Martin. Okay. I've lived that. All right. And because what happens is you commission the report at one point in time. Then while the report's being done, the PR people and legal people are telling you to do something the PR people call put it on the credit card, which means when guys like you ask a question, you say, sorry, I can't comment on that until the report's done.
Gotcha.
Well, the whole time that's happening, you all are flooding the zone with all these other questions that are being asked after the report was commissioned. So when the report comes, it's like in Back to the Future when they're drawing on the chalkboard. When the report comes out, it's answered the questions from when the report started, not all the ones that filled that gap where nobody was saying anything.
Gotcha.
Right? And this just happened at Stanford with the president on an unrelated, something that wasn't related to sports, but there were questions about his research laboratory. They commissioned the report. The media kept digging up more stuff. So by the time the report came, it said, yeah, this first thing wasn't all that bad, but of course it didn't answer all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So Northwestern is in the same boat right now because they've got Loretta Lynch coming to do a report. But in the meantime, the Trib and the Athletic and God knows who else has got umpteen people covering this thing. And it's going to be drip, drip, drip the whole time the report comes out. So the report is being done. So when it comes out, it ain't going to be good. I can tell you that.
Okay.
It never is. But the bigger question so Northwestern needs to be preparing for some pain when that report comes.
Sure.
But
including
the bigger
commissioner of the ACC, by the way, because his name's going to pop up a lot in this thing.
Well, yeah. And that, I think, again, Kevin and Randy and Susan and the people who are dealing with this are people that I trust. They'll figure out if they have to do anything there when the Northwestern report comes out. But yeah, I'm sure that's on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger question of whether a school like Northwestern, which, my God, is a outstanding research university, like it's up there with Cal and Stanford and these other schools that we've been talking about in terms of just the powerhouse in research that it is, and very selective for their undergraduates. Should they be even dealing with this? Listen, if you're the president, I mean, there are a few schools that are in this boat, right? Notre Dame, Stanford, Duke, Vandy, Northwestern, playing big time or trying to play big time sports and running these absolutely outstanding universities that are not that big. And so, one thing that people don't think about when they think about those schools compared to a Carolina or a Cal, which are excellent research universities also, is that the percentage of the student body that are athletes is much higher at a Northwestern or a Duke than it is at a Cal or a UNC. Now, so I'm sure they're thinking, like, why am I doing this? I used to think that myself too. It's like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
But I don't see how they would exit. I mean, look at already the Northwestern fans who are fired up about this. I mean, that's why he didn't think he could fire the coach initially, right? If the Northwestern fans didn't care, they would have fired the coach the first whiff of this came along.
Yeah.
But instead, Schill goes, oh God, what am I going to do? Well, I'll see if I can suspend him.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work. I went through very similar machinations myself. And it's because the fans have such pull, and the board members are all Northwestern alumni who care about athletics. And that's who Mike Schill's working for. So he's in the Kobayashi Maru.
We'll close.
I know you're a Star Wars guy.
Yeah, I'm more of a Star Wars guy, but you know what I love a good Star Trek reference. I love a good Star Trek reference every single time. Every single time.
Hey, listen, that musical episode of Strange New Worlds is just gangbusters great. I don't know if you guys have watched it.
I can't get my kids to watch it. They're too busy. They're too busy playing video games right now to watch some of these shows that I want to watch.
Right.
Holden, we appreciate the time as always. We always appreciate your insight and your candidness with these matters right now, because I think people need to hear it, and I'm glad that you're more than willing to talk about these things so we have a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that need to change, and it's not going to happen as long as everyone's hiding under their desk. So thank you guys for pulling the truth out from time to time.